Hey everyone, Leftism Today here. I wanted to respond to this video that I saw by this small YouTuber. Labor theory of value debunked by the subjective value theory. I actually made a video about the subjective value of theory yesterday, so if you want to see that, go ahead and check it out. But this video is basically going to be a response to this. It's 15 minutes long. This is going to be a live response. Anyway, let's start.
Why is this worth $10, this worth $300, and this worth $2,000?
Supply and demand.
Why is anything worth its price?
It's supply and demand. So about 10 seconds in, he already conflates market prices with equilibrium prices, or what Smith called the average price. I mean, these are all determined by supply and demand. Extremely high demand for diamonds, low supply, etc. But we're talking about equilibrium prices here when we talk about the labor theory of value. So we're talking about equal supply and demand, right? So if we go ahead and look at an equilibrium price, right, we can see here that supply and demand are equal, right? The quantity of wheat supplied is 10, and then the quantity of wheat demanded is 10, right? Supply and demand no longer is able to explain, because you can't say that there's a high price of something if there's exactly the amount of demand to supply or supply to demand, right? If the aggregate supply and demand are exactly the same. So it wouldn't make any sense to pose these as some sort of explanation.
Must have been grappling with this question for hundreds of years. It's hard to answer because while junk food feeds you and keeps you alive, in a sense, this is intrinsically worthless.
What do you mean?
Yeah, but supply and demand though.
Diamonds are intrinsically worthless, short bus.
What? Who says?
The world's...
If you want to know why diamonds fetch such a higher equilibrium price, it's because they have a way more quantities of average unskilled labor time to extract them. Rather than making a burger, it's way less quantities of average unskilled labor time. What he just put right here, funnily enough,
and this
is a
2,000
is a debunking of subjective value theory. This is the water diamond paradox, which he's putting right here, right? He just said, why is food so cheap, but diamonds are so expensive? In terms of equilibrium prices, this is a water diamond paradox.
Diamonds are intrinsically worthless, except for the deep psychological need they fill.
We understand that there are something called a use value in a commodity. And it doesn't matter. He literally says it doesn't matter if it springs from the stomach or from fancy, right? Commodities have what's called a use value. This microphone has a use value because I can talk to it. I mean, it's not just a fucking rock. You can't walk down the street and pick up a diamond, right? Marx wasn't a psychologist. He didn't care why objects had use values. He just simply noticed that objects had use
Sold
values.
out of De Beers in 2012 to multinational group Anglo American, a mining company his grandfather started in 1917. Old Nick owns 1% of this company now too. But his family earned it and they gave it to him so he can spend and invest the money however he likes.
But if they sold stuff that was worthless, Matty, how did they earn it? His miners worked harder than he did.
What kind of argument is that? Marx didn't give a shit if something was quote unquote worthless. If it has a use value, then it's a commodity, right? That's one of the three parts of a commodity: a use value, exchange value, and then it has to boil down to value, which is the average quantity of unskilled labor time, measured in hours, minutes, and weeks, etc.
You see, the value you add to society doesn't derive from how hard you work, so it won't necessarily...
It's not about... See, this is where people don't fucking get it. It's not about how hard you work. It's not about the individual working hard. It's about what the average... It's about calculating the average of what everyone takes to freely reproduce a good, right? I can't fucking make a computer for 15 years and then it's valuable. It's not about how hard the individual works. It's about what the social necessary amount of time is to reproduce that good, right? So let's say that Apple Mac right there, it takes an hour to produce that socially, right? I can't spend 2 hours trying to make that because somebody will undercut me. That doesn't double my value, right? If I make it in 30 minutes, right, I have made that product right there less valuable, because the more quantities of unskilled labor time it takes to reproduce a freely reproducible good, let's say a loaf of bread, as long as there's no restrictions on it, because those restricted commodities have equilibrium prices, or don't have equilibrium prices, excuse me, then that social average, it's about the social average. It's not, nobody cares about what the individual does unless you advance the forces of production to make reproducing commodities faster and therefore making it less valuable. That's where the whole falling rate of profit comes from.
Be reflected in your economic worth. Many people still disagree with this fact.
Okay, the labor theory of value is in no way Marxist-Leninist. It was actually pioneered by Adam Smith, who's the father of capitalism, and David Ricardo, who was a fucking free, Milton Friedman tier, free trade, free market maniac, right? He was an absolute madman. All Marx did was improve upon it. You can derive the conclusion of exploitation from the labor theory of value, but it doesn't necessarily, it's not used as the center point of exploitation, right?
The labor theory of value, LTV, was an early attempt by economists to explain why goods were exchanged for certain relative prices.
The reason why they say certain relative prices, and you can't just ignore that shit, is what they mean by certain relative prices is the equilibrium price, which is what I was talking about earlier. It's when supply and demand are equal and therefore cancel each other out. I mean, I could read the direct Marx quote. Nothing is easier to understand than the disproportion between supply and demand, and the consequent divergences of market prices from market values. If demand and supply coincide, they cease to have any effect, and it is for this very reason that commodities are sold at their market value. If demand and supply cancel each other out, they cease to explain anything, have no effect on market value. That's the quote from Capital. I literally just opened Capital and gave you the quote.
Of a commodity could be measured objectively by the number of labor hours necessary to produce it.
That's the key word, necessary to produce it.
Best known advocates of the labor theory of value were Adam Smith, David Ricardo, and Karl Marx.
Oh,
The labor theory
boogeyman.
of-
First of all, this is a question-begging statement. Mainstream economists, like, I'm sorry, but what kind of fucking claim is that? What's a mainstream economist? That doesn't make any sense. Whoever's the most popular, right? Whoever the Heritage Foundation funds. There are a ton of economists that subscribe to the labor theory of value. It's not a Marxist theory. It's used by Marx, but it's not a Marxist theory. Marx simply improved upon it, as did Ricardo.
In summary, as I already mentioned, it means the harder you work, the more you are worth. On the surface,
No,
it appears
that's not what it is. It's the socially necessary quantities of unskilled labor time. If it takes an hour to produce a computer, right, a Dell computer, that's the value of it.
people who are rich and successful do tend to work longer hours and spend
Here comes fucking Stefan Molyneux. Rich people don't work at all, dude. Rich people sit on dividends all fucking day, all fucking year. A lot of people that sit on dividends, first of all, come from old money. Do you really think that the shareholders at Nike are working as hard as the 11-year-old illiterate girls in Indonesia? They don't work. They hire workers to work for them, and they take both workers.
Hell, it takes effort to get out of bed and go to work in the morning for...
Yeah, but those aren't freely reproducible commodities. Like, why do people think that, like, if you have a theory, it has to apply to absolutely every facet of economists or economy, otherwise it doesn't work? Yeah, gravity isn't real because it doesn't apply to every facet of physics.
We have to work if we want a decent life, and you can't find meaning without sacrifice. The labor theory of value proposes that if an entrepreneur sells a widget for $100 and had to pay a worker $50 to make it and purchase $20 of raw materials, the big evil businessman then profits.
Yeah, this is true. He profits $30. Like, how is this false? Just because this is literally variable capital. If this is the materials, constant capital, variable capital, the wage is variable capital, whatever the fuck it's supposed to be is constant capital. CVS, constant capital, variable capital, surplus value. This is the surplus value that's extracted, otherwise known as the rate of exploitation.
This profit thus represents a theft of the worker's labor because the big evil businessman did no real work for it. Why does he get to sit back and steal the profit from all the workers in the factory? Believers feel that the big evil businessman stole that labor and they now have the right to remedy this injustice through force. It makes them spout off rubbish like this.
Boy, you know, what's wrong with exploiting underage 11-year-old illiterate girls? You know, what's wrong with factory nets? You know, I bet he wants a factory net installed in his house. I bet he wants to wake up every morning after 16 hours of hard labor in his ANCAP utopia and just fall gracefully into his fucking iPhone suicide net. Absolutely decimated by fucking Dang.
You see, when they say change the rules, what they really mean is
Go tell the government to point their guns at business and force them into doing what the unions tell them to.
Oh, Jesus Christ, have you never worked in your entire life? Do you want to see what non-union countries look like? You're literally calling fucking unionizers Satan. What an absolute deluded idiot.
it's all based on the belief that businesses steal the labour of workers.
They do.
LTV worshippers don't call what they do stealing, though.
What do they call it, Matty?
Collective bargaining. Yeah, those two. They have other words for it.
And then he Taxation is the price we pay for living in a civilized society. Nobody advocates taxation, you fucking idiot, on the Marxist-Leninist side. How fucking programmed do you have to be against unionization? Really? Like, what the fuck? You realize they're more likely to be a union member in the private sector because... or less likely to be, in the private sector because they don't fucking allow unions, because back in the day they used to literally shoot union leaders on the street. A union is literally the most liberal leftist fucking policy you can take. A union is like baby steps towards socialism.
Let's take the example I used before. The owner sells the widget for $100. He pays his worker $50 to make it and for $20 of raw materials. The gross profit stands at $30. What the labour theory of value fails to take into account is that out of this $30, the entrepreneur has to pay maintenance on his factory. He has to liaise with customers and set up contracts. He may have to make loan repayments.
I'm sorry, dude. I don't mean to be like this, but that's literally what constant capital is.
They have to make loan repayments. What happens if people no longer want what he's selling? What if there's competition and prices drop, and it wipes out his profit? He has to pay his workers on time, every time, and they are always paid.
Yeah, that's totally what they're always paid. Boy, do you realize that unions are the reason why people are always paid on time? Because if they weren't paid on time, and I guarantee they wouldn't be if there was no fucking unions, then the union would strike.
He may have taken a huge risk starting this business, and he needs to get it right.
Risk. Hey, let me tell you something, buddy. That shit is not the product of him going out and working. That shit is the product of other people's labor. Dude, he doesn't manage that shit. He hires other people to manage that shit for him. Do you really think that Jeff Bezos manages all his fucking money? Dude, he gives it to a hedge fund. How deluded are you?
Because if he doesn't, it means taking a large loss or even financial ruin. The labour theory of value also fails to take into account the fact that factory workers need tools and equipment.
That's constant capital. That's literally what that $20 was supposed to represent, is constant capital. That's the equation.
Without these, the business is worthless, as is their labour. The entrepreneur purchased the equipment with either his own capital or borrowed capital that he must now repay.
Jobs don't.
There's absolutely no reason why he needs to hold on to that capital, dude. Like, why? Why should he just stay here? Why should he just stay here absorbing the surplus value of the laborers? There's no reason to. Are you saying that biologically only the capitalists can get constant capital?
How will they feed their families if the factory never existed? If not...
So, okay, I'm just going to keep repeating my argument. Why is the capitalist required? Why can't the workers just do it themselves?
Not for this investment, the vast majority of workers around the world would be subsistence farming and living in poverty.
Yeah, but nobody... Okay, this is where he doesn't understand fucking Marxist theory. He doesn't understand dialectical materialism. Historically, there are good aspects to capitalism. One of them is obviously industrialization. That's why Lenin did the new economic policy in the Soviet Union until Stalin came into power and started the first 5-year plan, right? There are benefits. We don't live in an agrarian society because of capitalism, but that doesn't mean that capitalism can last forever, really. like, of course, feudalism took us from a hunter-gathering society into what we mirror today, right? It mirrored capitalism. Does that mean feudalism was great? No. All right? It doesn't make it. Feudalism was necessary, just like capitalism's necessary. But capitalism will ultimately collapse due to its internal contradictions. Most of them are laid out by the labor theory of value. There's about 12 predictions that are made by the labor theory of value. But he's implying that people back in the day just wanted to go to straight, fucking socialism instead of going through the necessary phase of quote-unquote state capitalism. Really, it's capitalism under the supervision of the dictatorship of the proletariat. So, congratulations, buddy. You just stepped into the first fucking basic Marxist 101.
In fact, this is what most Westerners were doing just 300 years ago, before we invented the steam engine and found free market capitalism.
Oh my god. Free market capitalism? Boy, protectionism has literally always existed, right? What was it? Henry VI stopped Flanders from bringing in textile into Britain. Protectionism, okay? Infantile industry growth has always existed. There's no such thing as free market capitalism. And he hasn't presented a single argument for the subjective theory of value.
So long as workers are there of their own free will and not through coercive
Through their own free will. Do I need to say more? If you don't fucking work in capitalism, you will starve.
force, then it is their own choice to make, and nobody should stop them. We also need to talk about the widgets themselves. Who invented them? Why are the widgets
What's a fucking widget?
worth $100? Did they just pop out of thin air?
No, it was the product of human labor. Thank you for proving the labor. It was the product of human labor.
Someone had to come up with the idea, raise the capital, then take the risk and
You're forgetting the part where they have to use the capital, the labor, to make the product. I love how they just blatantly ignore that fact. They're like, oh yeah, we need the idea plus the capital. Oh, but wait, labor? Who gives a shit? Once we get the idea and the capital, it just magically manifests itself. So let's say I got a pencil and a piece of paper. It's just going to magically manifest itself into a great political treatise, right?
produce these widgets in the hope that someone would purchase their product and they would profit. Often, entrepreneurs don't even start with much capital at all. Phil Knight and Bill Bowerman started selling Japanese shoes out of the back of their car.
Oh my god.
Over decades, they grew their business into the mega behemoth virtue signaling monstrosity.
Yeah, and do you think they... I love how he brings up Nike. Do you think any of the Nike shareholders labor in the fucking factories in Indonesia, in the Philippines, when it's illiterate 11-year-old girls who make pennies a day doing it, and all they do is take their surplus value because they don't have unions? Oh my god.
Known as Nike. It was their work over years and years selling a product people value.
He literally fucking posts a picture of it. Yeah, this literally has to be bait. Yeah, that's them right there working hard in the factory.
That made them rich. Part of that value was that Nike was cool to wear and all that kind of thing. So much for that. It is also not stealing to make a profit, even if you ignore all the additional costs, value-added processes, and the fact that the idea had to come from somewhere. The workers entered freely into an agreement with their employer for the benefit of both parties. Stealing.
This is a fucking ANCAP. Okay, first of all, the appeal to definition is one of the most... You can't make a fucking appeal to definition, dude. Let me show you why you can't make an appeal to definition, right? Do you think gay marriage should be legalized? Absolutely not. Marriage is defined between the union of a man and a woman, not between two men. Did you know that the 1812 the dictionary of marriage included for securing the maintenance of education of children? Wow, dude. Great fucking Googling some random dictionary.com. Bro, I didn't know dictionary.com was the albeit source for definitions. Dude, definitions are fucking subjective, right? We can all arrive, unless it's like a scientific definition, it's subjective. Unless it's like what Richard Wolff calls a sentence of a theory, right? Like an object of a theory. It's fucking subjective, dude. Like, to take the properties of other without permission or right. They don't enter freely into contracts, dude. You have to work to survive. Once again, why can't people just be neats?
Is by definition the taking of property against one's will. If you choose to work at a factory and...
Okay, if that's true, why can't I keep my surplus value? Why not? If that's true. If I labor to create 3 shoes, why do I get a wage? Why can't I keep the 3 shoes? Why not? Come on. Without permission or right. If I give permission for them to take my surplus value and gave me wage labor, then you'd be right. But what if I don't? I get fired. That's not a free fucking agreement, dude.
take the pay on offer, that is not stealing. That's negotiation. Only if
every time I go to work, I sit down with my happy employer and we negotiate shit, right? No, he'd fucking fire me, idiot. He'd fire me. The reason why he doesn't fire my ass is because I'm in a fucking union. The reason why he wouldn't fire you, is because if you were in a union, it's hard as hell to fire someone.
Reddy, you said you were going to tell us how things get their value. Stop gasbagging.
Fine. The truth is, value is subjective.
Here we
What
go.
you value and what I value are often widely different.
First of all, are you using value to mean the same thing that the labor theory of value means? Jesus. You can't just say value is subjective. What if I say value is 4? And then you ask me, what do you mean by value? And then you say, oh, value is 2 times 2. You know, here's a really good example, right? What's 1 plus 1? 2. No, you say, it's 11. It's 1 and 1. You put them together, and it's 1 and 1. Are you using math as described by mathematicians? No, I'm using it as I understand it. And as I understand it from these cool-ass Austrian economists, is that value is subjective. Really, what the fuck? If you want to see my debunking of the subjective value theory, go watch my other video. Value is not subjective. Why? Because of something called the water-diamond paradox. Now, water is essential to all life. Just like he was saying earlier, food is essential to all life. Yet diamonds are fucking worthless. That's what I was bringing up earlier, is the water-diamond paradox. Why isn't the equilibrium price of food extremely high while the equilibrium price of diamonds extremely low? It's because it takes more quantities of unskilled average labor time to produce a diamond, to extract a diamond from the earth.
Widely different, and we value different things at different times. This is the subjective theory of value. This is the idea that an object's value is not inherent, and is instead worth more to different people based on how much they desire or need the object. The subjective theory of value places value on how scarce and useful an item is.
How scarce? So this is literally supply and demand, when the labor theory of value is about equilibrium prices, where supply and demand cancel each other out.
Rather than basing the value of the object on how many resources and man-hours went into creating it. For example, land is valuable because you can build a house on it, and that offers things people need, such as
This doesn't contradict the labor theory of value. Marx literally says in the first sentence of Critique of the Gotha program. I can't fucking type. I wonder what Marx says in the first sentence of Critique in the Gotha program. Let's see. Labor is not the source of all wealth. Nature is just as much the source of use values. Wow! Looks like you're not fucking doing anything about the labor theory of value, buddy.
Shelter and territory. The exact price depends entirely on individuals purchasing the land and building houses. It all depends on...
That doesn't make any sense. Okay, I can't just come up to a piece of land. Okay, I'm just going to say this again. Why don't we just all value land cheap so we can get lower prices? Why don't we just all come together and value land cheap? Why would anyone want to pay more if other people are paying less? It doesn't make any sense. Why isn't everything why isn't everything basically free if value is subjective? Once again, explain the water diamond paradox without using supply and demand. because the labor theory of value is a theory about equilibrium prices and not supply and demand. So in order to say that the labor theory of value is debunked by the subjective value theory, it would have to be talking about the same thing. It would have to be trying to prove the same thing.
Where it is and its utility. As such, prices can vary greatly. The widget in our example is worth $100 because that's what it can be sold for. People
It's worth $100 because of supply and demand.
value the widget more than they value $100, so they purchase it.
That doesn't make any fucking sense, dude. That doesn't make any sense. You're trading the exchange value of $100 for the use value of a widget, whatever the fuck it is. It's not because you value it so, it's because of supply and demand. And once again, you can't say that supply and demand is a contradiction of the labor theory of value because the labor theory of value is the force behind supply and demand.
It's got nothing to do with the labour that went into making it.
Yes, it does.
That's a cost in the process of the end goal, selling
That's
a
literally
product
what gives
to the
it-
customer
what gives
for
it value.
money.
That's literally what gives it value.
The difference between what a good chef produces and what a bad chef produces is obvious to everyone, and it's reflected in the price of the food in most cases. A bad chef can take already valuable foods like fruit and eggs and destroy all their value through poor processes.
Supply and demand. There's no demand for that shitty food, but there's definitely demand for good food, and once again, supply and demand does not contradict the labor theory of value.
A good chef could take the exact same ingredients and turn them into a masterpiece of flavour. The effort and labour they put into their work has little bearing on its value. So why is it that an intrinsically worthless rock can sell for thousands of dollars? The key is listening to what Nicky Oppenheimer actually said. Diamonds are intrinsically worthless, except for the deep psychological need they fill.
That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Some random quote from some random fucking diamond miner doesn't make any sense. And I'll explain how. Water. Everyone needs water. Okay, the water diamond paradox is a fucking contradiction. It's actually a paradox of subjective value theory. Water. Everyone needs water. Everything that's biological needs water. Nobody gives a shit about diamonds. Nobody cares. Right? Diamonds don't fill any psychological need. Just because you're quoting some random fucking diamond miner, right? Some random fucking bourgeois diamond miner who paid a bunch of, I don't know, African people to fucking mine his diamonds for him, right? Just because you're quoting that asshole doesn't fucking make it an argument against the labor theory of value, right? What kind of evidence is this? This is so anecdotal. This is literally just a quote from some bourgeois diamond miner, right? I'll give you evidence. Water is needed by literally every single human being in the world. Water is the single most universal drink. The next universal drink being tea, right? That's the second most consumed drink in the world. The first most consumed drink in the world is obviously water. So, without using supply and demand, explain to me why water fetches such a low price without using supply and demand, but diamonds fetch such a hard price. And that's because, look at it. It takes all of this constant capital, these machines, this factory, these mines. It takes the variable capital of all the workers, their wages. It takes all of this to extract the diamond. Meanwhile, it takes pretty much no labor power to go out and get some clean water. It does take some labor power to clean it. And that's where the water diamond paradox is explained by the labor theory of value. The water diamond paradox is not explained by subjective value theory because people value diamonds way less. I don't fucking value a diamond, right? At all. So where is my... I don't value diamonds at all. I think diamonds are just the oldest gimmick in the world, right? Why is my evaluation on diamonds not causing the price to go down? This is a completely ridiculous view.
That deep psychological need is the need for a lady to feel special and show her status with something shiny. It's also a symbolic gesture of the man.
Yeah, you're talking about use value, but you're just dancing around the question here. You're not explaining why it has a higher equilibrium price than water. You're just saying, oh, it's because you impress ladies with it. Yeah, is impressing ladies really more useful than fucking drinking water so you don't have to die?
The point is, value is subjective. It's based on an individual's preferences and tastes, not to mention the economic laws of supply and demand. I've spoken about this in my other videos on...
Boy, you just say, okay, this is literally an academic agent tier argument. In his theory against Jack, he says, value is subjective. It's determined by the market. The market, okay, determines the market price. Supply and demand determines the market price. He literally posts the fucking equilibrium right here. He literally posts the equilibrium right here. Jesus Christ, dude. Supply and demand, right, may be explained by the subjective value theory. The subjective value theory explains supply and demand, but what happens if we reach this here equilibrium? Do you know why it's in purple? Because blue plus red equals purple. We are no longer talking about fluctuations of supply and demand. We're talking about the equilibrium. That's the equilibrium price right there. This is no longer able to be explained by supply and demand, right? You can plot it, but you can't explain why it's so, right? Let's say the price was right here. Why is the price such? Because it's going up in supply away from the equilibrium demand. Let's say the price is right here, right? Why is the price so low? Because it's going away, right? It's going away from the equilibrium price. It's going down. Up, down. These are supply and demand fluctuations. This equilibrium price right here is explained by the labor theory of value. It's not explained by subjective value theory.
Economics, all in this playlist. People get rich in a free market capitalist economy because they offer a great deal of...
There's no such thing as a free market capitalist economy, even in fucking neoclassicalism. Even in fucking neoliberal economies, dude.
...value to other people in it, not because they stole anyone's labor. The
Yes,
value
it
is subjective and based on the needs and wants of the people within it.
That doesn't make any sense, dude. You're saying value is subjective and based on supply and demand, therefore labor theory of value wrong? Like, this just shows that they don't fucking read Capital, dude. If you read Capital, you know what's funny about Capital is he literally says, he makes a claim, and then Marx over and over literally says, now I know you're thinking blah, 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 and then he answers all of their points. That's what happens when you read Capital, dude. Marx literally says, now I know you're thinking, and then he lists a counter argument. Right?
Nobody knows what people are going to buy or what they are going to spend their money on until they actually do it.
Doesn't contradict LTV.
We all have free will. Well, most of us anyway. It's a theory used to justify the mass murder of more than 100 million people in...
Oh, yeah! Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez killed 500 quadrillion people. Really, dude? What is the labor... You know you don't have an argument when you have to bring up the 100 million meme. You know, you just absolutely know you don't have an argument. Like, what if you started talking about the subjective value theory, and then I was like, yeah, but capitalism kills a billion people. Has killed a billion people. How would you react? Jesus Christ. Really? The 100 million meme? Holy fuck, dude. Yeah, Adam Smith was a premier communist back in the day. So was Ricardo. They were just top-tier communists.
Less than 1 century. Those who still claim to believe this
It's pretty funny how you can defend free market capitalism like fucking Thatcher when Thatcher supported fucking Pol Pot. Idiot. And fucking the United States supported Pol Pot. That fucking offends me, dude.
nonsense are either horribly ignorant of reality.
Taxation is the price we pay for living in a civilized society.
Yeah, I know, dude. Why can't I just rape my 13-year-old underage fucking child slave while letting off a fucking recreational nuke into Burger King?
Headless, I skip like Rita lift the ocean. I drift like my planet don't spin.